I received a call from one of my advisors saying that a certain individual, a prominent doctor out of Las Vegas, who had been working on Area 51, had been a consulting physician to Area 51, had as his number one request, his number one wish on his life bucket list to visit Skinwalker Ranch.
Wow.
And this advisor of mine asked if I would be willing to host him. And I said, yeah, of course. I was intrigued by this individual's background. And I said, as long as they sign the confidentiality agreement and the liability waiver that I put in place, I have no problem hosting him.
What did that conversation go like when he arrived?
Well, so they arrive in Salt Lake City, signed the confidentiality agreement. I of course, informed them that I did not want my identity as the owner in the public domain. I didn't want that disclosed, and I appreciated them keeping that private. I also told them that there had been reports, of course, for 20 plus years that there's strange activity on the property, and that even though I hadn't witnessed anything.
I mean, sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but as a skeptic of the entire operation that's been going on there, even after seeing the two images,
photo images,
where you were still a skeptic, correct? And now you have a guy who had a major part in Area 51,
right?
Which, I mean, what's going through your head when you get a phone call asking you for this guy from Area 51? This is his lifelong dream to come out to Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, does that validate?
No, I just thought it was cool. I thought it was interesting. I was happy to host them. And so when they signed the confidentiality agreement and flew into Salt Lake City and met with me, an hour before making the journey and flying out to the ranch, I told them, I said, you understand, I've owned the ranch for 6 months and I haven't yet to experience anything unusual. I've been going out there periodically to inspect the property, meet with my team, and all I find is a beautiful landscape. So if you're expecting that you're going to come out today and see something unusual, bear in mind, I own the property and I have yet to witness anything personally with my own eyes or even feel anything that would be even slightly unusual out on the property. So I look forward to hosting you today. I look forward to it being a fun day looking at a historic landscape that has a very interesting history to it, but don't expect anything more than that. I wanted that disclaimer to be out there at the very beginning. And so we proceeded to fly out to the ranch. We were accompanied by my physicist, who is Eric Bard, who continues to this day as our principal investigator. Eric was also a skeptic. Eric was the physicist brought in to debunk and disprove the claims of the gravitational physics effort that I had funded at our private hangar facility. So I thought, who better to bring scientific rigor and discipline and a critical eye and critical thinking skills to the ranch than Eric Bard. He had already disproved these core claims that we'd spent millions of dollars investigating. And was a very, very skeptical person. I mean, you could flat out call him that he's a non-believer. And so Eric Bard, the physicist, accompanied us that day, as well as ranch manager Jim Morse. And upon arrival, everyone wanted to hike up the mesa. Everyone wanted to get up on top of the mesa and look out over this incredibly beautiful property. And I was like, okay, fine. Knock yourselves out. I was wearing Armani slacks and black dress shoes, and I didn't want to get dirty, and I was trying to somehow get a line out at the time to check my voicemail. And so they proceeded to hike up to the top of the mesa, and within minutes I hear Eric Bard, the physicist, start shouting down, Brandon, get up here. I look up and I yell. I said, really? You really want me to hike up? You want me to run up the face of the mesa to join you? He says, yes, get up here right now. He's pointing to his iPhone. So I shrug. go booking it up the face of the mesa in my dress shoes and my slacks, and as I arrive out of breath at the top of the mesa, he's sitting there looking at his phone and motions for me to watch his iPhone. We sit there in silence for minutes. Nothing's happening. I see nothing unusual. I'm like, what are you talking about? And Eric says, well, you should have seen it. My phone was malfunctioning in the most strange ways. It was turning all sorts of magenta purple color. And I've never seen this. It was very, very unusual. And I just shrugged. I said, well, it's not doing it now. And about that time, the others that were up there on the mesa said that they were feeling a little bit woozy, feeling a little uneasy. They weren't, and wanted to hike back down and proceed with the tour of the ranch. And so we all went down and proceeded to drive out to Homestead 2, which is the cluster of old structures that seems to be a center of gravity for strange phenomena on the property. And as we pull up to Homestead 2, and we're all kind of congregating out in front of those old structures, it was interesting. A few people said, well, do you feel the ground shifting? And even Eric Bard said, yeah, I feel, you guys feeling this sensation that I'm feeling, kind of vertigo? And I was kind of across the courtyard from them, and I just smiled and said, no, I don't feel anything. And then all of a sudden Eric says, my phone's doing it again. My phone's malfunctioning again. Well, I learned from earlier that I need to move fast if I'm going to see, whatever is happening. And so I dart over to his side, and sure enough, his whole phone had turned purple, had turned this magenta purplish color, and was flashing and acting all erratically. And everyone was talking about how they were feeling uneasy. Well, thank goodness he had the presence of mind to screen capture the malfunctioning phone. I'll share that with you right now.
Thank you.
And you can see it. In fact, he was taking photos of me right before, standing in the entry to Homestead 2 in front of the doorway, just before they started feeling uneasy, and then ultimately this smartphone malfunction started occurring. It was strange. My brother Cameron, who is a very skilled aviator, has multiple degrees in aviation science and management, and my little brother Matthew, who runs operations, who were there, said that they weren't comfortable staying. They said, we want to leave. We'll go to the airport. Call us later on today when you're available, but we're feeling uneasy, which I thought was the silliest thing. I'm like, come on, really?
How many people from Area 51?
It was, so there was the surgeon, the doctor, and then he was accompanied by two security professionals. One was former president of the California Hells Angels, and another one was a contractor. And then he had his son, who was a grown adult. I don't know how old he was, but his son also accompanied. So it was a group of four of them that joined. At the time, my brothers, Eric Bard, who is my consulting physicist, and Jim Morse, ranch manager. And they're all witnessing this.
So what was the conversation like? They signed the paperwork, they signed the non-disclosure, the waiver. What are they hoping to see?
Well, I asked them, I said, geez, after telling them, I've never seen a UFO. I've owned the ranch for 6 months, and all I've seen is a strikingly beautiful landscape. And I'm skeptical. I've never seen anything like that I can report. And I proceeded to ask them, I said, we're sitting there preparing to leave for Skinwalker Ranch. I said, do you guys really believe in this UFO crap? And the two security guys, the two security professionals that were accompanying the doctor, said no. They shook their heads, no, we don't believe it. And the doctor just smiled, and he says, you guys don't even know what you're talking about. You have no idea what is real. And we all just kind of shrugged it off, and I kind of winked at the two security guards knowingly that, oh yeah, you know, the doctor's, you know, probably just another UFO nut, but that's okay. He's a nice enough guy. So anyways, we find ourselves out at Homestead 2, smartphone malfunctioning. Everyone's feeling these physical effects. My brothers are feeling uneasy enough that they want to leave, and they leave. They're happier driving and sitting at the airport for hours until I tell them that we're ready to fly back. And I'm finding the whole thing interesting. Well, as we're all discussing kind of the history of Skinwalker Ranch and the homesteads, you know, we proceed to kind of get our phones out to take some pictures. I felt like it was a good photo opportunity. And lo and behold, my phone's dead. It had previously been at 80% charge. My phone's completely dead. Eric Bard's phone that had recorded that, where he had screen captured the anomaly, the strange colors and flashing, was dead. The others' phones were dead. So we didn't have our cameras. So I thought, darn, well, we better go take them back to the ranch house and plug them in and let them charge up. But we don't want to disrupt our day because of it. It was very frustrating. And so we took the phones back, put them in chargers, and then we proceeded to return back out to the old homesteads. This time we drove all the way back out to Homestead 3, which is beyond Homestead 2, and it's a single structure. It's pretty haunting looking. And we pull up around the backside of the structure. This is October 14th of 2016. And we all pile out and we all walk around the other side. And again, we're looking at the landscape and everyone's visiting and having a good experience. I mean, my brothers have left and returned to the airport, awaiting a call, hours later. And we're just visiting. And after about 10 minutes, I asked, well, where's George, the big guy, the security, the 6'6" security professional that was there, wasn't present. And for some reason, we kind of lost track of him. And everyone said, well, when we all piled out of the open air Polaris, UTV, the Ranger, no one really paid attention. I said, well, let me go try to find him. So I proceed to walk around to the back of the Homestead 3, to find George. And right as I'm coming around the corner in this grass area where we'd parked it, and the vehicle being off in the distance, it was as if something cupped my ears. It was all of my hearing was impacted. It was as if I walked into a soundproof room. Have you ever been into an anechoic chamber or a soundproof room?
I have.
And that sensation, the only thing you can do to simulate it right now is by cupping your ears.
It's like a frequency change.
Yeah, all of the ambient noise disappears. And I thought it was the strangest thing. It was the strangest sensation. And then I see off in the distance, standing fully upright, this 6'6" giant of a man in the back of this UTV. And I thought, that's odd. So I yell his name, George. And I can hear kind of muffled. It's almost like yelling underwater. I thought that was strange. And I proceed to walk to get closer, and he's not responding. And as I near the vehicle and shout his name again, he's standing upright with his eyes closed. And right as I'm nearing the vehicle, all of the ambient noise, all of the sound comes back, is restored. And as I yell his name again, his eyes fluttered open. And he looked down at me. And I said, what's going on? Did something happen? What's going on? And he said, well, that was weird. And I asked him, I said, what was weird? What is weird? And he says, well, when you all jumped out, when you pulled up and you stopped the vehicle and you all jumped out, I stood up and found myself paralyzed. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move, and then everything went black. And he asked, how long have I been here? And I said, about 10 minutes. And he just shook his head, was obviously disturbed. I asked him, I said, has this ever happened to you in your life? Have you ever had this experience? And he said, no, I've never experienced anything like this. 10 minutes had passed. Who knows what happened, but he felt odd. He expressed the fact that he felt a little bit off, and we proceeded to gather everyone up and jump back in the vehicles. And so as we're going back to retrieve our phones to have our cameras, we're driving on that dirt road at the base of the mesa. You know, that main road that you see on the docuseries that runs east-west on the property. And as we're about halfway back to Homestead 1, or the ranch house, or the command center, as we now call it, the other security professional in the back starts shouting, "Stop the vehicle! Stop the vehicle!" And I'm driving. I'm just trucking along, driving this little Polaris UTV. And I look back, and he's waving his hands, pointing up ahead. So I bring the vehicle to a stop. And he's just shouting. He says, look at that, look at that. And sure enough, I look right where he's pointing, right ahead of us, right above the mesa at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on October 14th. And there is a 40, 50 foot long silver grayish disc-like object. What can only be described as a flying saucer. And it's just sitting there in broad daylight, clear as day, right above the mesa. Probably about 100 feet above the mesa or so. And we're all sitting there astonished. I'm like, you guys see that? And he's like, yeah, that's what I was trying to get you to stop the vehicle. Within a couple of seconds, it changes position. It literally blinked from one position to another. Either it moved with split-second speed, or it was able to change position through some other means, but it moves about 50 feet to the left or to the north. We all
like it appeared 50 feet to the left, or you actually saw it move?
It was like in the blink of an eye, it could change position and move that quickly. We all sat there astonished. And said, whoa, did you see that? Seconds later, it drops to just kind of a low hover above the mesa. It literally changes position and drops right above the mesa. Still sitting there, clear as day. It was almost like a video game. It was surreal. And then within a few seconds later, it darts to the right. We're all, with every movement, we're gasping. We're saying, are you watching this? Do you see this? And then within about 20 seconds from the start of the event, it is gone. It appeared that it either went to a dot as if it were darting off into the distance at split-second speed, or it was literally phasing out of our perception instantaneously. But it was gone. And that whole event, spanning about 20 seconds, that I saw right in front of us with multiple witnesses at my side that I had not met before that day, that had professed the same skepticism that morning, sat there changed forever. In that moment, Shawn, I went from being an open-minded skeptic to an experiencer. It wasn't about belief. It was undeniable. It was fact. What we saw was real. Eric Bard, my physicist and principal investigator, upon all of us getting back, asked that we not talk with each other about the event. He wanted to get our independent testimony, which was wise. He wanted to make sure that we all saw the same thing and all reported the same thing. And he did. He independently took down all of our testimony that matched up, that aligned perfectly. We all saw the same UFO, the same erratic behavior, and we were unchanged. We were changed by that day. It was crazy.
What amount of time were you from top of the mesa where Eric's phone started acting up to
2 hours?
So that's a hell of a sequence of events.
Yeah.
For 2 hours of time.
And we get back, and here's the postscript. Not only did we all give matching independent testimony relative to the events of the day in that specific event, the next morning, the 6'6" security professional that had the experience out at Homestead 3 checked himself into the hospital, where he sat for weeks with an illness that no one could diagnose, that he described as the worst sickness he'd ever experienced in his life. He couldn't get up, couldn't walk. And this immediately followed the experience. I mean, that's a lot of correlating events that took place on that day. You have smartphone malfunction, rapid battery depletion, acute medical episodes.
For multiple people.
Yeah, multiple witnesses, a diversity of witnesses, including two who chose to leave the area, were so uncomfortable they did not want to stick around. And then a UFO sighting in broad daylight with multiple witnesses. All of those things that occurred in October 2016 changed my entire perspective. And from that point forward, I proceeded to not only allocate significant funds in order to establish the scientific platforms and the security necessary in order to study this property and to document the reality of the phenomena. But I was focused on bringing in the right team and expanding the team of professionals in order to understand the nature of what we were dealing with.